Hello there, and thank you all for coming. Um, so, what am I going to talk about? um, so, way back when I first started my career as a photographer, I was sent to Studio 54. This was like in 1977. It was December 1977. And Studio 54 opened up, I think, in April of 1977. And basically, when you opened up the newspapers, that's pretty much what you saw, Studio 54. It kind of hit the ground running as a club and became like the place for celebrities. It had a reputation for being a place where, sex was happening up in the balcony and downstairs in the basement. Drugs were out there, cocaine, quaaludes, all that kind of stuff. I mean, had a really wild reputation from day one. And a lot of that had to do with the fact that they had a tremendous publicity team that was inviting celebrities, that was making sure it got on page 6 of the Post as often as possible. So that was what Studio 54 was all about. And I didn't really, I wasn't really that into the whole dance, club culture. The music scene, my music was really, before that, it was more CBGBs and, I guess British rock from the 60s, that kind of stuff. So I really wasn't sure what to expect. And I really didn't know that much about club culture, quote unquote. But that's what I want to talk about today, is club culture. And why it's important. Is it important? Is dance culture and dance music and all that, is that even important? Is this stuff that I shot back in the 70s, is it relevant? Is it important? If so, why? And is the culture today, is the club culture today important? Why is it important? These are things I have thought about since I did this body of work. Scott over here just asked me if I knew back in the 70s when I was shooting that someday, 30 years later, 40 years later, I'd actually be publishing a book on this, and there'd be people sitting in a room listening to me, and I had something to say about it, The fact is that no, I didn't. I thought I was really amazed at what I was seeing. And I had a camera, and I was just starting out, and I thought, wow, this is a great, personal project for me to do. And so I got deeper and deeper and deeper into it. And I was working at the Village Voice then, and they would send me out occasionally to photograph at one of the clubs. And at that time, there was Studio 54, there was Xenon, which was similar to Studio 54, like down the block. If you couldn't get into Studio 54, you could usually get into Xenon. But it had the same kind of setup as Studio 54. It was an old theater. It would have sets that came down during the course of the night, lighting. And in those days, the DJ booth was always off on the corner somewhere. And the DJ was hidden almost. He could see over the booth to see the dance floor, but people were not looking at the DJ. And people didn't know who the DJ was. I mean, some people who were regulars would know who the DJ was, but it was a different world back then. And there were clubs like Paradise Garage with Larry Levan, who is today, I think, highly revered as being an amazing DJ and innovative and started a lot of different things. There was a Mud Club, which was sort of the anti-disco. So I guess the question is, why is all of this relevant? And to be totally honest with you, I've been pondering this question for weeks, because I knew I wanted to sort of propose that question when I came in here. And I wasn't really sure what the answer was. And it wasn't until like I was driving here today that I stumbled on what the answer is. And it's a book. It's a book by a writer named Peter Gay. And has anyone ever heard of Peter Gay? Right? No. Okay, I hadn't either. But he wrote a book in 1968 called "The Outsider as Insider." Okay, and it's about the Weimar culture, and the Weimar Republic and the Weimar culture was something that happened in Germany after World War I. So around 1920, at 1919, something like that. And after Germany lost the war, the Versailles Treaty was thrust upon the Germans, and they had to pay tons of money for reparations, and basically it threw the country into chaos and turmoil. And inflation was incredibly high, and they had to create a democratic government. The Weimar Republic, the Weimar era, lasted about 10 years or so, maybe 11 years, until Hitler took over in like 1930 something, 32, 33. And then it was over. With this extreme right-wing Nazi party took over. But during the 20s, it was crazy. It was a crazy, crazy time. And that's what this book is about. Weimar culture, the outsider as insider. And it was a time period, especially in Berlin, not so much outside of Berlin. Like people outside of Berlin thought that Berliners were crazy. They thought they were like just wild, decadent, sex-crazed, drug-taking. They still are. I don't know. But it's a lot like New York. A lot of people think New York is that way. We're crazy here. We're just like liberal. We're just screwing everybody and taking all kinds of drugs. And, that's how a lot of people in America see New York. So I see a lot of similarities between the Weimar culture in the 20s and the 70s in New York. New York being Berlin, during that time period. So I'm going to show you some of the stuff I've done. This is the first night I was sent up to Studio 54, and this is kind of what I saw. And what it was there was always a crowd outside of Studio 54. I mean, even on like a rainy Tuesday night, it would spill out into the street. Some nights it was completely taking up the street. This was kind of probably like a Tuesday night, looks like it was raining. So this is what I saw that when I was sent up to Studio 54 that first night by the Village Voice. And there's a doorman there who's basically standing on a box, looking at people and deciding who's cool and who's not cool, who can come in. A lot of it had to do with casting a party. They didn't want it to be too gay. They didn't want it to be too straight. They didn't want it to be too young, too old. So Steve Rebell, who was part, half the ownership of Studio 54, he was kind of responsible for casting the party, and he would go in and out and check out the room and then go out and look for people. And so there was this constant checking of the room, which created this really, I think, amazing party, like every night. By the way, if anyone has any questions as I'm talking, please feel free to interrupt. It's okay. I'm happy with that. So the night that I was sent there, I was supposed to shoot, this is Lillian Carter on the left here, who's President Carter's mother, who was president at the time. And she was doing some work in India and was being awarded, something for her work there, and they had the event at Studio 54. They invited a lot of regulars. She's sitting next to Andy Warhol. So this was kind of like the shot that I was sent to Studio 54 to get that night by the Village Voice. And this and a few other shots. Again, my first time there, and this is sort of like this is what I saw when I got there, which was like, you know, photographers climbing over each other, elbowing each other to get a picture. And then someone would go, oh, over there, and like let it run over like a pack of people and, you know, just, you know, crowd around and take the picture. So I was a little out of my realm that night, but I was pretty fascinated by it. You know, I mean, I had heard of paparazzi, but I'd never been like one of them. I'd never been in the crowd, you know. So what I did was, like, I wanted to see like what the regular crowd was like, because this was like not a regular crowd. This was like a specially invited dinner thing. So when everybody was leaving, which is probably about 10 o'clock, maybe 11 o'clock, I was out of film, and I bought like 10 rolls of film from one of these photographers, Tri-X film, for my camera, my Canon F1. And I bought 10 rolls of film, and I went up to the balcony where it was dark, and I hung out because I didn't want to get thrown out. I figured I probably would get thrown out. And waited around for like an hour while they cleaned up and they let the regular crowd in. And this is basically one of the very first shots that I took when the crowd came in. I walked down and I saw this couple, and I might have taken one shot before I even introduced myself. And then afterwards I said, can I get a regular shot of you guys? And we walked over to the corner and I took this shot. And it's interesting how things happen. But so that night, that picture, the first picture that I took pretty much, was my muse for like the next couple of years. I looked at this and I thought in my brain, Cabaret, the movie Cabaret. And I didn't really have much knowledge of the Weimar Republic at that point, but I knew the movie Cabaret, and I kind of knew what it was about. So, let me see. Yeah, so there's that, just in case some of you don't know the movie Cabaret. And so, you know, this is kind of what I had in my mind. I think that's Marlene Dietrich. But, you know, the sort of, the gender bending, gender fluidity of the time. She was a well-known bisexual actress in Germany, and then she came to America.
What was her name?
Marlene Dietrich.
Marlene.
Yeah. She did a film called The Blue Angel in Germany. These are some pictures from the 20s in Berlin, the Weimar Republic. And this is what it was about, you know. Again, it's like the outsider as the insider. It's like a time period when those who were like marginalized in the world were accepted. Not only accepted, but encouraged and welcomed. And that's really what I saw that first night that I went there, and what I felt was that welcoming, that anybody was welcome in this place. Whether it was young, old, gay, straight, lesbian, you know, LGBTQ long before the term existed. Anybody. And one of the things, let me just flip through here a little bit more. Yeah, just some stuff about Weimar Republic. It was considered a very creative time in Berlin, in Germany at that time, in terms of movies like Nosferatu, you know, The Blue Angel. It was on par with Hollywood at that time. You know, we had the Roaring '20s here. you know. So things were pretty wild here, but it was not the same thing. And in Paris too, there was pretty much of a scene. But Berlin was really the place at that point. You had like Three Penny Opera. You had you know, all kinds of. You had the Bauhaus, which was, you know, strip off all the fancy, you know, curlicues, and just strip it down to like, you know, form equals function. You know, so it was a very, very creative time. It was a time when things just radically changed. And along with this change was the cultural change and acceptance that you know, the drag shows in Berlin, the transvestite, as they used to call it then, parties back then. That word is no longer used today, I know, but that's what the word that was used back then. You know, so the culture was really, really open, welcomed, talked about. The art was critical. It was anti-war after World War I. New York was, you know, we had just finished Vietnam, you know. There were so many similarities between New York and the 70s. The economy in New York was so bad. Let me move on a little here. Yeah, more of like, this is all like the El Dorado was the Studio 54 of that time period, the Weimar Berlin period. And these are all men. Some of these pictures were taken by Bernstein, photographer, who is the Eye of Paris. And he was interested, I think he was Hungarian actually, and he moved to Paris and fell in love with it and decided he wanted to really explore the nightlife in Paris and the culture in Paris. So he was shooting both the rich end, you know, the high end of Paris, as well as going, you know, underground at night and shooting the underground scene, the night scene. So this is now 1978, maybe 77, 79, Studio 54. So, you know, after I shot that picture of that couple, I started looking around, and in my head was this whole cabaret Weimar Republic thing going on. And so it seemed like everywhere I looked, I saw this. You know, and this is one of the things that I saw. Here's something else. This is at Studio 54. That's actually in the you can barely see him, but that's what's his name from Kid Creole and the Coconuts? August.
August Darnell.
Yeah, thank you. That's August Darnell who was there that night. I decided, like that first night, that I wasn't going to focus on the celebrities at all. Couple of reasons. I considered myself to be actually a portrait photographer. And to me, if I'm going to shoot a portrait of a celebrity, I want to have like control over it. You know, I want them in my studio or in a location. I want to light it. I want to talk to them. I want to engage, you know. So the idea of standing on a chair, you know, elbowing over somebody and snapping a few pictures, and that just didn't interest me at all, you know. And so there were plenty of people who were doing that, and I figured, you know, I didn't really have anything to add to that. So I wanted to focus on what Bernstein focused on and what a lot of the photographers from the Weimar Republic, Berlin, Weimar focused on, which was like the actual people. These are not celebrities. These are just how people lived at that time. So that was a decision I made like that night when I was sitting in the balcony waiting for the tables to clear. And so that's what I did. And so New York City, just a little history about that. So New York City was really like in trouble financially. They were almost bankrupt. Garbage was piled up on the streets because they couldn't afford the sanitation department. Was down to skeleton crew. Police department was down to skeleton crew. White flight was, I think it was coined back then because it was a dangerous place. It was really scary, you know. A lot of times I think about post-COVID as like similar to that, you know, where people flew out of the city and, you know, bought places upstate or in Connecticut or whatever. It was dangerous. It was pretty bankrupt. The fire department was skeleton, so a lot of times buildings would just burn down to the ground because no fire truck went there. There wasn't enough staff, and landlords were burning their buildings down to get insurance money. You know, it was a really scary, crazy time, the 70s.
I know this because the local grocery store asked my father at the time to do that, to burn the place down.
Is that right?
They wanted to give him 5 or 10 grand, I can't remember.
Is that right?
And he didn't do it.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it was really happening. I was living on Thompson Street in Soho at that point, and I was paying like $90 a month for my apartment. Yeah, I don't live there anymore, and I think the current guy is paying like $4,500 a month to live there. So, but I hung on to that place for a really long time, and it was cool because, like, I don't know where Keith Haring lived, but there's an A train station on Spring Street, a CE train, I think actually, and I would see Keith Haring's, you know, scribbling his drawings on the wall, you know, like every week or two there'd be like a new one, you know, and you know, I mean, at that time you knew him because his stuff was like kind of appearing all over the place, you know, but then he became, you know, what he became. Also, Jean-Michel Basquiat, you know, Basquiat, his stuff was Samo, right? It was like
Crown.
What's that? The crown, yeah, exactly. I mean, he'd say something like, you know, something usually about like money or being poor and rich, and some social commentary, usually a little bit like hard to decipher, but it was always signed Samo, S-A-M-O, and that, you know, he was around. So all these people were around. Warhol was around. This is the 70s, and there was a lot going on artistically and creatively during the 70s. And a lot of it had to do with the fact that because people were leaving the city, because the city was dangerous, rents became really cheap, like my rent, you know.
It's creativity because you can afford to make art and not worry about your rent.
Exactly.
Yeah.
People came from all over the world to live, you know, creative people came from all over the world to live in New York City. Soho, when I was there, you know, was lofts, you know, they were old factory spaces that closed down, and so people would move in and, you know, fix them up. So it was a very creative time, and some people have considered it the most creative time in New York City. I've heard that from a number of people. So plus in New York City, or actually maybe in the world or the country, you had civil rights in the 60s, right? You had the women's movement from the 60s. You had Stonewall in 69. So there's, you know, the gay pride movement. You had all these movements in America that had started to gain some traction. And, you know, what happened in like mid to late 70s was this disco craze sort of hit the air. And it started like with Saturday Night Fever. That became sort of like, the thing that drew a lot of attention to itself. And then Studio 54 opened up. And I think the way I perceived it is like what I saw at these clubs were, blacks, gay, old people, all different subcultures, like, the trans culture was really big in the discos during that time. And, they were all basically, in my imagination, like going under like one tent together to party, and the music was party music, and it was great dance party music, I mean, I came from the 60s music, with like I Am the Walrus and, Bob Dylan, music where you sat and listened and thought, and, it was like making social change, or it was, music to take LSD by, and, stuff like that. But this was dance music. This was like really get up and dance, So I saw it as like a real party. I saw it as an invitation to come in under the tent and party. And, that was something to photograph. That was really something. That's when I saw all of these cultures, when, the outsider became the insider, And so here we are. So, yeah, so Ford told New York City to drop dead. But the party began. And, there was a lot of, it was, the pill from the 60s, and open sexuality was encouraged at the disco. Places like Studio 54, Xenon, Electric Circus. The queer culture was, they weren't just accepted, but they were welcomed with open arms. Please, come in. Express yourself, be yourself. This is actually a young Miss J. Alexander, from, was it America's Top Model, I think? Yeah.
I'm blessed that I didn't realize that she was that old. She looks amazing now. I'm like,
I know,
man,
she does.
man.
I've met her in person, him in person, and he looks great.
Yeah.
Yeah. One thing that was interesting in kind of looking into the culture of the Weimar Republic in the 20s, cocaine was like the driving drug during that time period, because after the war, they weren't allowed to, a lot of countries that produce things like nicotine for cigarettes and other things like that, they were not allowed to trade with them anymore, but they could trade with countries that made drugs like cocaine and heroin. So you could actually buy cocaine on the street. It was legal. You could buy heroin on the street. It was legal. So these clubs were fueled by cocaine, much like they were in the 70s. I mean, cocaine was, and you can see this. There's on the table there's a little cocaine, and the guy sort of maybe passed out. I don't know, or having a heart attack. I don't know, but and then this, which was iconic from Studio 54, the Moon and Spoon. Do people know about this? You all know about this thing? I mean, it was really so iconic back then. But like sort of towards the end of the night, the spoon was sitting here and the moon was here. And towards the end of the night, the spoon would just rise up like this, and it would light up, and it would go up the nose and into the eyes. It was fantastic. I mean, cocaine was really illegal back then. And so to me, it was a pretty ballsy kind of thing to do. You know, it's like, I thought it was great. And decadence, you know, just like get up and take your clothes off and fall asleep on the couch. I have other pictures of this. This is Potessa de Lafayette, who was a pretty famous trans at that time, pre-op trans, and Andy Warhol used to like to photograph her, and people used to. I think Dali used to like to paint her. This is Rollerina, who was a Rollerina lived in Greenwich Village and used to roller skate around Greenwich Village like this when he wasn't working on Wall Street.
That's awesome.
Yeah, he had a job on Wall Street. I don't know that he was a broker, but he had some sort of like, I think, kind of office job on Wall Street. But this was his persona. I think that button says, "How dare you presume I'm heterosexual?" But he would go around and with his wand and bless you, you know, like the Queen or like a, you know, something. And this was Disco Sally, who was always at Studio 54 or Xenon. And the story about her was that she was a lawyer and her husband was a lawyer. She was in her 70s. Her husband, who she was married to for like 50 years, died. And she was alone and she was very lonely. And a friend of hers said, "Let's go out dancing." So a friend took her to Studio 54 and she loved it. And she was there all the time. Like, I think every time I went there to shoot, she was there. And celebrities sort of like learned about her and they would line up to dance with her. And so they would like, she'd wrap her legs around them and they'd spin her around. And, you know, I think she was like 4'11" or something. You know, she was like a little,
What was her name again?
Disco Sally.
Disco Sally.
Yeah. I can't remember her last name, but I was really just interested in, I mean, I was in heaven when I was at this place because there was just everything right in front of me with my camera.
Bill, how old were you at that time?
I was about 26. Yeah. Perfect age. I'd gotten out of college and I was tooling around New York doing a lot of different odd jobs, mostly graphic arts. I was a graphic arts major. So I was doing graphic design. I ended up working at like Rolling Stone magazine, New York magazine, and the Village Voice. And then at a certain point, for various reasons, I just decided I didn't want to have a desk job, you know. I wanted to be, and I saw these photographers coming in and they'd just been here and there and they'd delivered this work and I thought, that looks much cooler than what I'm doing. So I quit and I gave myself 3 months to see if I could do it. And I started getting work and then I discovered this and it became my personal project. And somehow, I mean, back then, like I said, my rent was $90 a month. So it wasn't that hard to like, you know, to live and eat and live in New York City at that point without making, you know, a ton of money. So I don't know what photographers do today. It's a whole different world. But so I became interested, like I said, in the people, you know, who was going there and like, who is this guy? You know, what does he do? Is he a bike messenger? Is he an actor? Or, you know, and I would just really pull people over and ask them if I could take their picture. And, you know, sometimes I would spend some time talking to them. Sometimes it was just a shot. Again, it was a celebration. That's what I felt. It was like celebration. It was going there till 4 in the morning, 5 in the morning. You know, much like, you know, the club culture that's going on today. Places like Good Room and House of Yes and $3 Bill and et cetera, et cetera. Um, so, yeah, so what this, I mean, this was, I love the speaker, you know. The technology during that time period rapidly changed. And Richard Long created some amazing sound systems and amplifiers and but you know, this was all new. You know, this did not exist, you know, 5, 10 years ago before this. This is Richie Kasor at Studio 54, you know, with the turntables. And I think probably a lot of you were sort of interested in like the equipment back then, maybe, you know, what they were using. And I don't know, maybe it's sort of primitive in today's world, you know, when you see this stuff. But so you've got the lighting guy on the left, you know, you had the guy who operated the smoke machine, and there was the sets that would come down, those lights would drop down, and then they'd go up, and that, you know, Coke Spoon and Moon would drop down, and all kinds of things throughout the course of the night. It constantly changed. Like every half hour, I guess, you know, there'd be a different, and you were in a different room, basically. And that was one of the things that was really wonderful about it, you know, especially if you were like a little high. You know, when, you know, if you were had some, yeah, where am I? You know, it's like, wow. I started dancing, and I was, you know, there were these, you know, pole lights, and now it's like, you know, streamers and something else, you know. So it was fun. It was really a fun environment. This is this little story. This is at a place called Sybil's. I think it was in Midtown. It was more or less like a hotel basement, kind of mainstream. People would go there, but she was the only female DJ that I encountered during my time period. I know there were probably a couple of others, but DJing was really a guy thing. And so it was unusual to see a woman. And I didn't know who she was, and on my Instagram I posted, does anybody know who this is? And put it up there for a long time. Finally somebody responded, and they said, yes, that's, you know, she knew who she was. And so this summer I was hoping, I made a print of this, and I was hoping to get together with her, but unfortunately she developed cancer and died really quickly. So I didn't get a chance to meet her, which is really unfortunate. You know, it would have been nice to meet her.
Can I just say it's incredible that she's barefoot in the booth. Like, we all know what clubs are like, and
Yeah.
walking around with no shoes seems.
Yeah, it seems a little risky, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah. What you don't know what you're going to step on. Yeah, I think I like that so much about this picture too. With she kicked her shoes off, and you see her high heels there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just love that about it, and her pose and all that. Yeah. So yeah, so here's like it kind of in action at, this is again Studio 54. More of the technology, more of the sets, more of the, you know, elaborate things that would drop down from the ceiling. There's a place called Crisco Disco. Big Crisco can there. A gay club. Really popular, you know. And gay clubs were not just gay clubs. They were like, you know, they were gay clubs, but everybody went there, you know. This is actually Ice Palace in Fire Island. This is, you know, this might be sort of where a lot of this started, in the early 70s. I don't know, does anyone know about Ice Palace in Fire?
No.
Yeah, okay. You probably know more about it than I do, but I know that the whole, you know, mixing records, the disco ball, a lot of those things, you know, doing poppers or whatever, and dancing all night, you know, that was like what was going on out there. And they brought it back to New York in the wintertime, You know, it'd be out there all summer, and then in the wintertime they brought it back, and people started the Loft, David Mancuso, and you know, it just sort of migrated in a way, or merged with what was going on in New York, and it became what it became. I think that maybe it had something to do, you know, like the club culture definitely has a queer element to it. You know, it's the gay community has really contributed a tremendous amount to the music, to the look, to the feel, to the fashion, to the, you know, to so much of it. And I think probably, you know, places like the Ice Palace had a lot to do with that, you know, contributing to that. This was the doorman at the Ice Palace in Fire Island. This is Patasa, who I think I showed you before, and that's Kid Creole on the side there. This was one of the nights that I was there. And Patasa would, when I went there and Patasa was there, she would always like come over to me and like pose. You know, and this night she just grabbed a chair, put it in the middle of the dance floor, and just started posing for me.
Bill, what time is it at that, when that photo was taken?
What time?
Yeah.
I mean, it was probably pretty late. It was probably like, you know, 2, 3 in the morning.
What time would you usually get out of there, you think?
You know, it depended. Because some nights I would do like 2 or 3 clubs. So I would stop at like Studio 54 for an hour. I'd go over to Xenon. I'd go over to a place called Gigi's Barnum Room. Then maybe I'd go downtown to Paradise Garage and go over to the Mud Club. You know, so I did like, I was really interested in capturing like what the whole scene was like in New York City, you know, because it was such an amazing time. There were so many clubs. There was
What
such,
about like some of the swingers clubs, like Plato's Retreat, stuff like that?
wasn't interested.
Yeah.
Yeah. Really wasn't interested. Yeah.
Can I ask, so you're like photographing all these clubs and you have all of these beautiful pictures. Where do you keep all of your film? Like, you must have crazy archives, and we all know New York space is very limited.
Actually, I have about 450 rolls of film, and they're all in envelopes and marked and identified, and it's all in one big like suitcase, you know.
Right.
And it goes between my storage unit, sometimes when I get paranoid, you know, when I don't want it in my house, and then it comes back to my house when I'm sort of working on it. Yeah, but it all fits into like this suitcase, you know, and like, you know, that's where it was for a long time. After this time period, I did a book in the 80s, which I'll show you, and then it just sat in that suitcase for from about 1980 to about 2005. Just, you know, nothing happened to it. But it's, you know, it's all kind of, for me, like well categorized and, you know, organized, which is not very good, but for me it's good. So this is Patasa, again, posing for me. Those are the steps to the balcony at Studio 54, yeah, which was infamous. I mean, that's where a lot of stuff went down. And evidently, you never saw this or anything, but Patasa used to pick up older guys at Studio 54 and take them up to the balcony to read poetry, I think. This is just hanging out in, I think that's
Just
Studio
hanging out.
54. Yeah,
Casual.
Casual.
Question here.
When going into these spaces, were they welcoming of the camera, or were there moments where people would say, no, not this part of the club?
They were pretty welcoming, I would say. Yeah, it's surprising now that I think about it, how open people were to it. I think there was a different, you know, cameras were different back then.
Pictures weren't shared with the world within 10 seconds either.
Yeah, it wasn't, pictures were sort of welcomed, you know, oh, a photographer, you know, doing, you know, whatever, doing, maybe working for a newspaper or maybe just taking pictures for art, you know. It's a very different mindset about photography than today.
You know a photographer called Meserole Ave?
Yes.
I bought one of her books recently, and she was similar to you doing like Studio 54, The Garage, and some of her pictures are very graphic, like people in sex acts. I'm like, damn. But like you said, I guess people they were just not that worried about it back then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Sometimes I don't know her work that well, but I do know her work and I do know about her. Sometimes, you know, some photographers would sort of stage things too.
Right.
I'm not sure if it was staged or if it was, you know, but I don't know. I saw things sort of like that and I sort of decided not to shoot it. I don't know. That's not what I was trying to do, you know, but I like her work. You know, I think it's really interesting. So this is at a club called Xenon. It used to be the Henry Miller Theater, and you know, a trans would just, you know, get up and dance and party. There was also another sort of aspect to this, which was more of a performative type of experience, and there was an organization called Le Clique, and they were like a traveling disco, and it reminds me of like Glitterbox today, with Defected Records in the UK, where you have stage performers go out and encourage people to like kind of lose their inhibitions, and you know, so very performative. And so I covered that too because I thought that was part of the scene. I think I don't know who that is, but yeah. Yeah, this would be at like a Le Clique party, you know, putting on like silver paint, nudity. This was a busboy at Studio 54. This is what they wore. Here we are at like a Le Clique party, and that's what would happen. And you know, it's interesting if you look at sort of the guy in the back in the white jacket, you know, with the big collar, you know, black shirt, you know, just the style of that time. This was also, I think this might have been a clique party, I'm not sure, but this person just started like stripping and was dancing on this table for quite a while, and then as I'm shooting,
Oh,
you know,
hello.
yeah,
Hello.
hello. Whoops, what happened? Uh-oh,
Oh, we're back. There you go.
okay.
We're back.
We're back. Yeah, so this was surprising to me. You know, I wasn't expecting this. But what I really like about this is the reaction of the people. I mean, they're like, you know, I don't know, to me they seem like they're into it, you know, they're digging it, you know. I don't know. I guess there might be somebody who would like look at that and go, I don't want to see that. But this was accepted. This was part of the scene. This is one of my favorite places called Gigi's Barnum Room. And it had quite a history. It was like the Peppermint Lounge in the 60s, where the twist started with Chubby Checker, and then it became something else, and then it became the Gigi's Barnum Room, and I think it was pretty much run by the mafia, and it was a safe place for trans men and women of that time. It was like the place to go. Minute you walked in there, it was like it was their place. You know, they were the people who were there, and I, you know, it gave me a chance to sort of be around that culture, and to talk to some of them and just engage. And
Were you allowed to take photos inside there?
yeah, yeah, you were. They liked it. You know, they were really into it. And they had this trapeze and net above the dance floor. And so they would have performers, they were called disco bats. And so it was a little bit like a circus, you know, which was,
Barnum.
G.G. Barnum, yeah.
right. And there's a, you know, a few of them posing for me. Yeah, that's actually, let me see, this is a little bit out of order, but, so this is, I went to the dressing room of the disco bats and talked to them a little bit. This is the room that they would get ready in. And this is, I don't know, I had an exhibit at the Museum of Sex in New York a while back, and this was a poster that was like on the subway. So people seem to know this picture. This is, her name is Ava, and I actually, you know, every time I went there, she was there. So we ended up talking, and she wanted to know what I was doing, and, you know, asked me about photography, and I asked her where she was from, and, you know, and she was evidently saving up for, you know, an operation, and, you know, just loved this place. She was just a very soft-spoken Puerto Rican. She was good friends with Salvador Dali, and when Salvador Dali came to town, he would invite her to come to dinner with him and his friends, and sometimes he would set her up with one of his male friends as what she called a surreal joke, which I thought was a little bit not funny, but she was fine with it, and there she is. Just like a really lovely person. And I just like the way the guy on the right is like looking at her. This is more like Le Clique, performative stuff. A vat of Jello, and like some sort of like,
Keytar.
is that what it is? A keytar, like that squirted out liquid? Yeah, of course. I mean, you know, why not?
Bill, where is that photo taken?
This was I think at the Electric Circus. Yeah. So Le Clique would basically, they had a membership, and they would basically rent out a club for the night. Funhouse, Electric Circus, maybe Xenon, and they would have their people come in and their membership come in. Again, like Glitterbox, you know. And I think House of Yes has a little bit of that thing going on.
More than a little.
Okay.
Can I ask, at the start of this talk, you were asking about like the clubbing culture back then and how it's relevant today. When you go to clubs today, do you see people experiencing the same kind of freedom enjoying clubs?
That's a good question. It's a little different, I think. You know, I must say I haven't gone to as many different clubs as I did back then, so it's hard for me to really say. But I have been to Good Room, I have been to House of Yes, I've been to $3 Bill, and some other clubs. I also had you know, there was a thing going on at the Museum of Sex for a while. I think that there's a desire to have the freedom of expression that there was during that time. I think that the culture as a whole has made tremendous strides in the acceptance of marginalized cultures back then. So there's there are opportunities to express yourself, you know, more freely today, which I think is great. It's a different time though, you know. It's not necessarily as repressed a mainstream culture as it was back then. So it's more accepted. It's more, but it's, you know, I think I think some of the clubs like House of Yes has picked up on a lot of this, especially the performative stuff, and put that out there for people. And it's good. It's just, for me, it just feels like, I think it's a good thing. It seems much more like entertainment, like in a sense people are sitting back and being entertained by it, than actually engaging in it and partaking in it, you know? That's just my own personal opinion, you know? And I'm a little bit more of like an objective, like I'm looking at it almost like a photographer, you know? Like, are these people really involved, or are they watching? And, you know, so that's my perspective on it, you know? What do you think?
I mean, I think that people still go out for the same reasons, and being on the dance floor is truly like one of the few places that you can feel free. And like I see the sentiment back then, particularly with like gay culture, and the way that like being on the dance floor was the only way that those people could truly be themselves, because in their day-to-day life, when it wasn't so mainstream and accepted that they could do that, I still do see that, and that makes me happy. I mean, that's why we work in clubs and we do this, to give people that freedom of expression.
Yeah.
Which I think it's really important to continue this culture.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I see that. I definitely see that. That's the key. That's the big picture there. That's the whole thing, you know. That's what keeps the club culture and dance culture like so special and important. You know, it's a place to go to just be accepted, to be whoever you are, whatever you are.
I find it interesting, like, for us, I'm guessing most people here, if you're into this kind of culture, you're in it for life. Like, it's not just like a thing where you're going out when you're 21 to go get drunk or whatever. Like, you're really into music and you really like feel it, and that's why we do it. And like, people who don't get it, they look at you and you're like still in your 30s partying, and they're like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Like, no, this is like who I am, and it gives you, like, you can have a night on the dance floor that'll change your life, and that is what makes it so special.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. No, I totally believe in that, and that's what, you know, that's what kept me so interested in this, and, you know, wanting to explore it and wanting to then go back and see, well, where is this coming from, you know? And then I sort of like looked at the Weimar Republic area, and, you know, and said, oh, okay, you know, there's a connection here between what's happening today, 50 years ago, and then 50 years ago before that. You know, it's pretty amazing. This is more, yeah. So this is what I did over COVID. Is I went to my 450 rolls of film and picked out stuff that, you know, a book was published before this. It was called Disco.
I own that.
Who said that? Oh, you did? Yeah. This was published in 2015.
And I say, I went to the Museum of Sex and Sawyer exhibit, and that book was there, and it was like probably like $40, and I guess I was really broke at the time and didn't buy it.
Yeah.
And now I regret it so much because it's worth like $600. That's not the point. I just wish that I had it.
Yeah.
Like, because now it's sold out and you can't get it.
It's sold out. Yeah.
I might talk later. I didn't know that.
Yeah. I have a couple of copies. This is one I brought because it's all kind of messed up, you know, but yeah, it's actually, if you go on eBay, I guess it is, $1,600.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's not money to me. I mean, but I'm amazed by that, you know. It's nice, you know, so if people want it. But I called the publisher after the first printing sold out. It was right before COVID, and I said, we should do another printing,
Yeah.
And he said, yeah, let's do that. And then we were getting ready to do it, and then COVID hit, whenever that was. And he said, you know what, the printing plant is closed, everything's kind of closed, so we're going to wait on that. And then over that period of time, I guess it was about a year, he changed his whole strategy as a publisher, and he started producing books like on Queen and Led Zeppelin, like these mass market books. And he said to me, look, you've got a really great book here, but it's like a niche book for like a niche audience, I want a really wide net out there for books. So I'm not going to do it, I'm not going to do it again.
That's
So I
very
said, well,
short-sighted.
yeah. So I said, well, do you mind if I do it? What was that?
I said, fortunately, there's a new book.
Fortunately, there's a new book. Yeah. But so when I heard that, I was like, oh, damn, and then I realized a couple of my friends had produced their own books. And so I said, I'll do that, So I spent a lot of COVID going through these things and picking out pictures that, I love a lot of the pictures in here, but there were other pictures that were not, seen, and put this thing together and got Honey Dijon to write the forward, who I love. Honey Dijon. I think she's just like a force of nature, in this world. And Simon Dunmore from Defected Records wrote the afterword. And both of them are just like important people, I think, in what's going on. Like the Glitterbox thing is, I think, an important aspect of the culture today. So I'm happy with it, and I think it says what I wanted to say. I'm talking about this time period. Let's see, more performative types of stuff that were really interesting. Oh, there's Crisco Disco again. Oh, I also went to the roller discos. There's the Empire Roller Disco in Brooklyn, on Empire Boulevard, which is now a storage unit that I have my stuff in. I went to move my stuff to a storage unit, and I heard this disco music in the background of the unit. And I said, wow, how come you play, all disco music? And so, well, this used to be Empire Roller Disco. Like they tore the building down, but they put up Stop and Store, which is the name of the place. And I figured, I definitely have to keep my stuff here. I mean, it's just like,
That was the name of
got
the
my
place,
name all
Stop
over
and
it.
Store?
Stop and Store on Empire Boulevard, yeah. But this was a great place. It was huge. It was, it was primarily black, but you had skaters from all over, like the tri-state area would come in here. Had an amazing sound system. It had a really great vibe.
I used to go to Roxy. Like I first went there when I was 12 in '81, and it was amazing. It was amazing. Like from '80 to '82, maybe '83, roller skating was really big on the Lower East Side. And the music was always phenomenal.
It was great, yeah. There was also Metropolis in New York City, yeah, in the 70s. Those were the two places in the 70s, Empire and Metropolis, and then the Roxy came. Funhouse. This was where Jelly Bean Benitez used to play, and Madonna used to hang there, and Mud Club, kind of the anti-disco of the time. They were more punk, Talking Heads was probably as close as they got to kind of disco. Blondie, Clash. Ramones, yeah. And it was, like a Lower East Side art kind of vibe. Television, yeah. She's got a thing on that says support the Nicaraguan struggle, which was like, so it had a little political thing going on too. Derivative of the English punk thing, which is like very anti-upper class, materialistic sort of thing. This was the legendary bathroom at Mud Club where everything happened. drugs, sex. Yeah. Klaus Nomi, amazing operatic voice, character. Unfortunately, died of AIDS, I think, in the '80s. He appeared with David Bowie on Saturday Night Live. Just a really amazing performer. I mean, I remember seeing him, and he came out the first time I'd seen him, and he started singing like in this operatic voice. And I was like, what? You know? And then like a couple minutes later, you're like, wow, what an amazing voice. This guy, just, you know. And his looks, he had these crazy looks. Paradise Garage. So most of you probably have heard of Paradise Garage. It was down in my neighborhood in Soho on King Street. It has become, I think, even more legendary over time than it, you know, at the time it was like a, you know, big favorite place, but it was sort of overshadowed by places like Studio 54. But now people are beginning to see that, you know, this place had some real soul to it. It was actually an old garage, and so car garage, parking lot, and so they transformed it into this dance space. And so this was the ramp that you would go up when you first got there, and they put lights on the side, and the sound system was probably the best in the city, I would say. And Larry Levan, the DJ, worked with Richard Long and was constantly tweaking the sound system and invented a lot of different elements to sound systems in those days. But you'd walk up this ramp when you were finally let in, and you would start to feel the music. The whole place would vibrate, so you'd start to feel it in your feet, you know, coming up from your shoes into your feet, into your legs. It would just get louder and louder and louder and deeper and deeper and deeper as you went up, until finally you'd enter the room and you were in the dance floor, and it was just, you know, amazing to be in there. The sound was just incredible, and it was always packed. I spent some time with Larry up in the DJ booth, and got this shot. This shot is probably my most requested as a photographer, like shot to license. It's been in everything. There's a movie being made right now in LA about this time period, and a DJ, and he's got this picture like up on his wall. So I don't know. I don't even know the name of the picture. I don't think it has a name yet. But so that happened. Yeah, I get requested for this picture all the time. Documentaries, movies, books. The other one I get requested for is this one, which is the dance floor. And you weren't supposed to take pictures on the dance floor at this time period. This was early on. This is like '79. And this is actually taken like right after I spent some time with Larry in the DJ booth. So I had my camera, and I was kind of on my way out. I was really late, and I was really tired. And when I look at this picture, I smell poppers. I'm like, wow, this room was full of that smell, you know, amyl nitrate. And so I was just sitting there, and I was watching the crowd, and I was inhaling poppers and getting high, and I had my camera, and I knew that I wasn't supposed to shoot, but I just did it anyway.
You were
know.
on your way out.
I was on my way out. I figured, I can't, how can I not, you know? So I took like 2 pictures, maybe 3 pictures. And, you know, I had my flash and stuff, so I knew that I'd get busted, you know, pretty quickly. But, so I processed the film like a day or so later, and I saw this, and I was just like, wow, okay, I really sort of got it, you know? And this picture is one of the few pictures of the dance floor of Paradise Garage. In, you know, before like later on in the 80s, you know, there's a lot more pictures, but this is an early picture from that time period. Again, I get requests almost like every week from all over the world. Somebody's doing some project and they want this picture. It's just really weird.
We have prints of that one as well.
Oh, that's right.
And the Larry Levan one.
Yeah, that's right. So I've made posters of these things that you can actually take home with you. This is, so we're winding down here. This is a very cocaine-filled Steve Rubell one night, who's screaming at me because I'm taking pictures of him.
Or was he actually angry there?
No, I don't think he was angry. I think he was just, he was clowning around kind of,
Okay.
you know? He saw me and, you know, I was snapping away and just, ah, you know. But he was always pretty stoned, I must say. He was either handing out Quaaludes or giving you hits of cocaine if you, you know, if you went there regularly. And then he eventually went to jail soon after this picture was taken for tax evasion. This is, I'm winding down here, so this is kind of like, this is Victor Hugo, Halston's boyfriend. I don't know, there was a documentary on Halston on TV, and they talked a lot about Victor Hugo, who was kind of a wild.
It was, what's his name? Who's the actor that played Obi-Wan Young?
Ewan McGregor.
Ewan McGregor.
Ewan
yeah.
McGregor
It
was
great,
Halston.
Yeah, it was really good.
It was really, really good, yeah. And Disco Sucks. So this is kind of what happened probably around 1980, the backlash against disco. People wanted their rock and roll back. They wanted their white music back. So many of the stars of disco music were black and women. And, you know, there were racist elements to it. There were, you know, misogynist elements to it. There were homophobic elements to it, you know, of like, enough disco, we want our rock back. So, you know, there was really there was disco demolition in Chicago where they burnt disco records on the baseball field. And then Steve Rubell and Ian Schrager went to jail. And then, you know, kind of to top it off, you know, AIDS. AIDS was always there through the 70s, but it wasn't really known, like what is this thing? They just knew that people were dying. And then in 1980, like the Medical Association sort of said, yeah, there's, you know, acquired immune deficiency syndrome going on here. You know, that's what this is. And it's transferable. And so what happened was people didn't know how to get it, how it was transferred. You know, if you're talking to somebody and like a little spit goes on you, from them to you, does that do it? If they're sweating and you touch them, if they're breathing, you know, like think of like when COVID first started, the first month of COVID, you know, you just had no idea. And, you know, but AIDS was like 50 million times worse, you know. So, you know, people were afraid to go out for a while, you know, until things were sort of figured out. So that's sort of what happened, and that's kind of when I stopped shooting. I took a lot of, I took this book to a bunch of publishers. Didn't look like this, but a writer and I started going to these different clubs, and we got a book published in 1980, and it was out for like 6 months, and then like disco demolition happened, and you know, disco sort of became a bad word, but this was sort of like a tour guide book through clubs, and it wasn't exactly what I had in mind, you know, but it was something, you know. It was published. I was a young guy, and Vita would interview people, and you know, describe the scene, and I would photograph. But it has kind of fun stuff in it, like, you know, Gigi's Barnum Room was $10, you know, and $5 before 11. The drinks were $1.75. So it has a lot of fun information like this. You can get this like on eBay, I think. It's called Night Dancing.
250 drinks.
Yeah. $14 to get in. Wow. Yeah, exactly. You know, it's a fun book. And then this book came out in 2015, And this led to the exhibit at the Museum of Sex called Night Fever, which was supposed to be there for like a few months. It ended up being there for like 2 years. And then they would have events there on Friday or Saturday night. And let me just see where I am here. Yeah, and yeah, they designed the space, one of the rooms with a bar. It had like aluminum foil walls, much like the factory, Andy Warhol's factory. Serge Becker designed it, who also designed Area back in the 80s and worked at the Museum of Sex, and as well as a lot of other places. So they did a really nice job. This is the poster.
Print on our wall is from that exhibit.
Yeah, that's right. The poster, yeah, I've lent this aluminum print to Razor and Tape, and that was one of the pictures there. And that's my son on the lower left. And I said, "Hey Jackson, look, there's Dad," you know? And he like looked at me and went like,
Whatever.
"Who cares?" So one other thing I wanted to show you, if I can, is these are some pictures from the Weimar Republic period, a photographer named August Sanders. And he published a book called Faces of the 20th Century. And he wanted to basically, he was in Berlin, he wanted to go around and photograph like all different people in all different walks of life, you know, from the bricklayer to the doctor to the philosopher to the, you know, streetwalker to whatever. And I always loved his work and was always felt very influenced by it. And what's that?
What was his name?
August Sander. Yeah. And I started asking people, Lauren, if I could come in and shoot at clubs. And Lauren was lovely enough to let me come in for a couple of nights and shoot at Good Room. I also shot at $3 Bill and House of Yes. And I would find people that I thought were interesting, that sort of represented the, you know, some of the club culture today, but they were a little bit more fringy than, you know, than not. But I was interested in the whole, this is like going back before COVID, in the whole sort of like gender fluidity, non-binary aspect of what's going on in our culture today. You know, what's your pronoun, you know, that kind of stuff. So, so I started shooting. I would set up a little, you know, studio in the back and ask people to come in. This is some of the stuff I did. I think this was a Good Room.
Guy from Good Room, yeah. I
Yeah,
that.
remember them?
Yeah.
So, I think this was the Museum of Sex. Yeah, some of them are at Museum of Sex, some of them are at, you know, kind of all over the place. So it's kind of like a project that I'm working on, just, you know, as a personal project. I plan to continue it and get more people, trying to develop the idea a little bit. And so that's it. Here's my book. That's it. Thank you.